There you are. I've been looking for this guy everywhere, and since he's down by the river, it's a perfect place to talk about how we're gonna do some portrait photos. But we're gonna go over all the techniques that you need to take a great portrait. So, I'm using my stuffed animal Max. You may recognize him from The Little Mermaid. And the reason is because he's not going to move, and I can focus on all of the subject techniques that I'll want to be using. Now, if you're taking a picture of your own pet, be forewarned, it is going to be a challenge to keep them in the same place in case they're trained really well. Maybe a family member or a brother or sister would work even better because they're going to be able to listen to your instructions. But I'm going to walk you through all of the different techniques for what you need to do in order to take a great portrait. You're going to take those pictures, you're going to put them into a Photopea project, and you're going to make either a portrait collage or some sort of holiday card, whatever you'd like to make, and then you're going to hand that into this assignment as well as taking the weekly quiz. So let's jump right in to how to take a good portrait photo.
Hello everybody, and welcome to this week's video. It is December 14th, and as you saw from my introduction, we are going to be working on some portrait photography. So this week you're going to take at least 3 to 5 different photos and make the portrait collage using Photopea. You're also, as always, going to take the weekly quiz, but make sure to attach the downloaded JPEG that you make in Photopea to this assignment. So it's really important. You're going to be not only turning it in, but putting it in your portfolio, and there's going to be an assignment that is going to be grading your portfolio a little bit later in the semester now that we have things rolling. So let's continue along with this video, jumping right into each of those techniques. So first off, when you shoot a portrait, what you want to do is find a background that looks good out of focus. That is the most important part about a portrait, is a pleasing background, right? A great pose can be ruined by a really distracting background. All right, you want to focus on the eyes of your subject. If you miss the focus on the eyes, it really throws the portrait off. Think about if you've ever looked at a painted portrait and where the eyes almost feel like they can follow you as you look at it from different angles. Think about how important it is to have those eyes crystal clear in focus. All right, you're going to frame them using the rule of thirds from the waist up, thinking about appropriate amount of space to leave above their heads or to the sides. So really think about your composition, and you are going to take multiple shots, both vertical ones like I have here on the left and horizontal ones like you have on the right. So both ways, whether if you're shooting with a phone, some pictures this way for portrait style, some this way for a landscape style, because both settings can work great for pictures. So I always take 2 pictures from each perspective to see which one's going to work best. All right, if you're taking pictures of a person, try and make them laugh and smile. It works much better when you have a natural look on someone's versus just forcing the cheesy smile. And if you're using a camera with manual settings, use the widest aperture that your lens will allow. Now, you might not understand what this means. If so, please come to office hours. I would love to show you how to use your camera and get some cool backgrounds just like this. Yeah, you can make portraits look pretty amazing just by unleashing some of the potential of your camera. So we're going to get into how to shoot with a DSLR and how to shoot with a smartphone, because I know a lot of you are using smartphones for this, but you can still get some great pictures.
All right, so in a portrait photo, you've probably seen before some portraits where the backgrounds are either completely out of focus and you have no idea what they are. That's called a neutral background. You have the background that is out of focus, but you can still identify what it is. That's another thing that you see in a lot of different portraits. And then also you'll see some compositional elements such as leading lines or foreground objects, and we're going to get into all of those. So the first one that I want to look at here is having my background out of focus but still be able to tell what it is. So being down by the river, I've got some cool reflections here and I've got some trees in the background, and I'm going to try and shoot these with both my DSLR and with my smartphone. Now, what I'm going to do with my smartphone is I'm going to do 2 different things. I'm going to use portrait mode for some of them, because portrait mode actually takes 2 photos whenever you use it. In portrait mode, it takes 1 picture of your subject in focus and it takes 1 picture of your background out of focus. So that's really kind of a cool technique. Now, I know not everyone has that option, so I'm also going to show you how to take that just with a traditional smartphone camera so that you're just having one thing. Now, if you're really close to your subject, the background is going to fall out of focus anyway, so we'll look at those. But then also, I will show you some pictures that I'm going to take with my DSLR. What I'm going to do for those, or I'm going to have the aperture as wide open as I can. Now, it's pretty bright out here, so I'm not going to have it completely open, but you'll still get the idea of how I can throw my background out of focus for these shots. So let's take a look at some of those. All right, so first off, when I'm taking this picture of Max here, and I just want maybe the river as the background, I'm going to see what that looks like. I am going to use a mode called AV mode. Now, if you have a Canon camera, AV mode is the aperture priority, meaning how much light lets in through the front of your camera here, and you just controlling that. So what I'm going to do is try and have the biggest aperture I can, which is actually the smallest number. All right, so let me see what that looks like as I take a picture of him. So I'm going to try and focus on the eyes of my subject. That is always important. Now, as I try and take this photo, it is going to be really hard in this light to have that aperture all the way open. So I'm going to do the best that I can with it. Now, actually, that's going to work out just fine. I think it's going to look pretty cool because he's going to be in focus while my background is nice and out of focus.
So for the first type of portrait, I want you to try one with a neutral background. This picture is of my daughter in my house, just looking at a wall. But she's not right in front of the wall. There's about 10 feet behind her, and the wall can kind of look soft and out of focus. It's just a general background that you don't really think about. And for one portrait, I want you to try and create a very neutral background. Now, please don't stand right next to a wall. It makes a picture look really flat, so make sure they're standing away from it. That way the background will slowly start to look out of focus a little bit, and the viewer should not be able to really identify what's going on. All the emphasis in a neutral background portrait, just like you saw with the one against the river, the first one of the dog there, is just to be on your subject.
All right, so now when I take this photo, the background is much closer. But I'm thinking about how I'm framing him up. His eyes are in focus. I've got trees on one side, I've got the river on the other. They're a little more in focus than in my last shot. Yeah, I like that. I think that turned out as a pretty good portrait of our boy Max.
Okay, now, other portraits, you might be able to see your background, but you just want some out of focus elements. And this one actually covers both examples that you're going to see. But the first that I want to talk about is just having something in the background that is out of focus. So when I turned my subject of that dog along the river so that you could see the trees behind more, you could really start to make out your location, but it was still out of focus. That's a key thing about having a portrait. So if you have portrait mode on your phone, give it a try. It works great with a DSLR also. Let me know which pictures you think turned out the best. I think some of my portrait mode pictures turned out pretty awesome, but I really love a good DSLR picture as well, because you can see, if you look carefully at this picture, it is not cut out from it. However, if you look at a portrait mode picture and you zoom in, you'll notice there's some like weird layering that appears as you look at it really carefully. At first glance, they often look great, and in the right light, a portrait mode picture on your phone can look pretty special. So experiment with that. Even if you don't have portrait mode, you can still get some of the same ideas, just like I was showing, by getting really close to your subject. Maybe even zoom in a little bit on your camera. I don't generally suggest zooming in on your cell phone because that's just going to create a digital zoom, but sometimes being zoomed in a little more will compress things and the background will look even more out of focus. But make sure your subject's well lit and have some out of focus elements.
So the next shot I'm going to try here is the leading line shot. So notice how I've got the riverbank that flows along in my photo. I think it's going to make an interesting line along the side of Max's head here. So I'm going to set Max up on this rock. Hopefully he doesn't take a dip in the river. Otherwise my daughter might be a little bummed out. This is actually my wife's back from the 80s because this is Max from under the sea. Let's not go under the river, okay? All right, let me set him up and try another shot.
So in each of these shots, you can see how the line of the riverbank really draws your eye into Max, and the tree behind him really works nicely to frame the subject. Okay, so you saw that picture on the river there, where the river was my leading lines, but you don't have to go to the river. Even just a road can work great for this. This is just a selfie that I took in front of the school. I thought the clouds looked really interesting. But as you look carefully, you'll notice the further things get away, they naturally fall out of focus. And that's because you can see, oh, I don't know, maybe a mile in this picture, all the way to the houses way on top of Mount Scott there. So this was not a portrait mode picture. This was just a regular cell phone picture. So you can still play around with focus of your background the further your objects get away from you. So always keep that in mind when you're taking a portrait about how close your subject is to the background behind them. So, but I have some leading lines here, just like you saw along the river working with that.
Now, just because it's a portrait photo doesn't mean you have to be held this way. In fact, it's a great idea to take all of your photos both in portrait and in landscape so that you get a variety of framing here. All right, so I think I got some pretty good shots, both with my cell phone and with a DSLR. Remember, I'm taking them both ways. Now with any of these, what's really important is to keep those eyes in focus. That's the most important part of a photo. We're gonna try portrait with a foreground object first. Then we're also gonna try a themed portrait. Now, I don't know if I have much of a theme for him, but I'll work on it. Let's try our next shot. All right, you may be asking yourself, why is Mr. Oliver laying down for the shot? Now, the reason why I'm laying down for this one is so that I can get the eyes of my subject. So I want to be right at Max's level. So if you're taking a picture of your lizard or your dog or cat, get down on the floor and take a picture of them. It's going to look a lot better. Okay, for this next technique, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a foreground element that's out of focus. So I've got this little stack of rocks that I want in the frame right here, you'll see in the shot. And I'm gonna get down on the ground so I'm level with Max. I can get him in.
Okay, foreground portraits can be a lot of fun. Also, this picture was actually taken at Happy Valley Park, just walking around. This was a little over a year ago in the fall. And here my daughter's hands are in the shot, but out of focus. And it really adds to the depth. You can see that her hand is in front of the tree that's in front of her with a tree behind her, with bushes behind that. And it really creates a lot of visual space in a photo. And this is by having those out of focus elements. So see what you can use with having a foreground that is going to help set up some depth in your shot. Even if it's not out of focus, maybe it just plays a little bit of framing. As a holiday idea, if you're taking a picture near a Christmas tree, maybe you could have just a few branches of the tree just in the corner of the shot, and it'll create some depth to your subject behind it. So play around with foreground. This is a huge technique that gets used in a lot of different portraits. I think definitely in some of the more artistic portraits. I really like using foreground techniques. I think the picture with a stack of rocks turned out excellent. And then also the final picture you're going to see of Max on a road is also kind of uses this foreground just by having the lines continue through it. You can see the parts of the line that make the foreground and the background. So really think about how foreground elements can add depth to your focus. But with all pictures, remember, focus on the eyes. This is a portrait. It's about a person. It's about a pet. It's about a stuffed animal, something like that. So see how you can make that work.
All right, Max, let's go. All right, so for your last portrait, I want you to try and do it themed. So because it's December, I figured a lot of you might want to do holiday themed or holiday cards, just like the example that you saw in my slides. But Max, you know, knowing him, he wanted to be in front of a fire hydrant. So I don't know, that's just Max. So I'm gonna see if this one works. I need something to prop Max up on. Ooh, my backpack might work. So let's see if that gets him high enough up off the ground. Maybe if I get down low. So I'm gonna have Max on the bag, and then me down low, looking at, so let's try just shooting it. You know, actually, after looking at all my portraits, I realized that my first one that I thought was a completely neutral background, you could actually see a lot of the river behind it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do another one, and this is just from perspective. I'm gonna be looking down. So the grass behind me here is gonna serve as the background just by being a little bit higher up than my subject. And I should be able to pretty much just put him in front of a completely green world. Lots of different ways to work on your portraits.
All right, for our last one, our themed portrait, like Max and his fire hydrant, is one theme. But here's a holiday theme of my daughter and our cat, Potato Bob. So obviously, she has got the Santa hat on and is in front of our mantelpiece, all right, thinking about the holidays. So play around with theme in your portrait. You have a completely wide open and freedom to make it any type of theme you'd like, but just kind of play around with theme, maybe even a sports theme, right? If you think about, if you've ever been part of a basketball team and you've had your photo taken with a basketball, think about how you could play with some of these same types of portraits by working in maybe some of the equipment that you use for a particular sport, things like that. But also keep your other portrait composition tips in mind, and you can really make a pretty excellent theme. All right, I wanted to show you these two pictures because these are pictures that demonstrate how aperture and focal length can help. So if you're not using a digital DSLR, then these won't apply to you. But if you look at the backgrounds on both of these pictures, you can see that they are really, really blurry. And part of that is because the aperture is set all the way to f2.8. That is the widest that many lenses can get to. If you just have a like a stock lens that came with your camera, you might only be able to get to f4 or f3.5, but that wide aperture is still going to help compress your background and create some out of focus elements. But the larger you can make that number, the better. So stop by office hours if you have questions how to do this. Also, as you use longer lenses, you can also create more of that. And I think both of these pictures turned out pretty cool. Just taken by thinking about aperture and thinking about focal length. All right, here's a picture that I absolutely love of one of our chicks when she was just a baby. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to make a person be the out of focus element as kind of an interesting kind of background. You can see this is with an aperture that's way open. I think it's all the way to 1.4. And really kind of just a unique picture. But just wanted to show you some things that you can do playing around with focus in your shots.
It's time for the secret word. All right, guys, I'm hanging out with my 80-pound lapdog, Mr. Scooter. Say hi, Scooter. Scooter's gonna be our secret word today. So the secret word is Mr. Scooter. We love Mr. Scooter, don't we, buddy? Okay, enjoy the video, kids. Happy holidays. Oh, and he loves me so much. Okay, goodbye, my little lapdog.
All right, so you're going to take your photos. Let's back up a slide. You're going to take your photos and you're going to go back to Photopea. You know, we haven't used it in a few weeks.
All right, so remember, we've got 5 different types of portraits to try, and you're gonna put at least 3 of them into your photo piece. So you've got a neutral background that's out of focus. You've got a background that's out of focus, but you can still tell what it is. You've got a leading lines photo, right? You have a foreground photo, and then you try a themed photo. So have fun with it this week. Please get it in as soon as you can. I'm gonna be grading them over winter break, so make sure you've definitely got it in. By Monday of next week. You don't want to end up having any assignments over the break. But I encourage you to keep taking pictures and keep shooting video. Have an awesome break. Let's say farewell to 2020 and hope that 2021 is a much better year for us all. So that's it. Never stop creating, and I'll see you in the next video.